High above the southeastern tip of Mindanao, where the wind carries the scent of wild orchids and the calls of a bird found nowhere else on Earth, there exists a forest that should not be able to survive. Its trees are centuries old, yet most of them barely reach a person's waist. Twisted, ancient, and stunted by soil so harsh it should have killed them long ago. These miniature giants have quietly stood watch over one of the most secretive predators on the planet. Somewhere among their gnarled branches, a bird with a 7-foot wingspan and a stare like a wolf hides from a world that has already pushed it to the edge of extinction. This is the story of Mount Hamiguitan, a mountain that grew its own bonsai forest by accident and became the last true stronghold of the Philippine eagle. If you are new here, this channel exists to uncover the stories the history books leave out and the traditions the world forgets to celebrate. Hit that subscribe button now, share this video with someone who deserves to know this story, and drop a like because what you are about to learn is going to stay with you long after this video ends. The Philippine eagle is not a bird most people will ever see in the wild, and that scarcity is precisely what makes its story so gripping. Sometimes called the monkey-eating eagle, it is considered one of the largest and most powerful eagles alive, capable of snatching prey many times heavier than expected from the forest canopy in a single, silent strike. Fewer than 1,000 of these birds are believed to remain, scattered across a handful of Philippine islands where unbroken forest still exists. Each breeding pair requires a vast, undisturbed territory to survive, which means the eagle's fate is tied directly to the fate of the forests it calls home. When those forests vanish, so does the eagle's ability to hunt, nest, and raise its young. That is where Mount Hamiguitan enters the story, rising along the Pujada Peninsula in Davao Oriental like a natural fortress. The mountain climbs from near sea level to over 1,600 meters, and as it rises, the forest around it transforms dramatically, shifting from dense lowland woodland into cloud-covered slopes, and finally into something almost otherworldly. At the very top, where the soil is thin, acidic, and starved of nutrients, the trees stop growing tall. Instead, they twist, bend, and shrink, forming a natural pygmy forest that scientists have described as one of the only tropical bonsai forests on the planet. Some of these trees are estimated to be well over 100 years old, yet many stand no taller than a grown adult. The reason behind this strange dwarfing lies beneath the surface. Mount Hamiguitan's upper slopes sit on ultramafic soil, a type of rock-derived ground that is naturally low in the nutrients most plants need to thrive and often high in elements that are toxic to ordinary vegetation. Rather than dying out entirely, the trees on this mountain adapted, sacrificing height and speed of growth in exchange for survival. Over centuries, this created a living miniature forest that looks almost sculpted by human hands, even though not a single branch was ever intentionally shaped. It is a forest built entirely by hardship, and that hardship became its greatest protection, since the same harsh conditions that stunted the trees also made the land far less appealing for logging or large-scale agriculture. Because so few people had reason to disturb this punishing terrain, the forest around it remained largely untouched for generations.
That isolation turned Mount Hamiguitan into an accidental sanctuary, not just for its miniature trees, but for an extraordinary range of wildlife that had nowhere else left to go. As lowland forests across Mindanao were cleared for farming and development, the animals that depended on unbroken canopy retreated further and further into the remaining wild spaces. Mount Hamiguitan, with its steep slopes and inhospitable soil, became one of the final refuges where that canopy still stretched from the valley floor almost all the way to the summit. It was here, in this unlikely stronghold, that one of the world's rarest eagles found a place to make its final stand. Researchers who have studied Mount Hamiguitan often describe it as a living laboratory, a place where an entire mountain seems to compress every stage of tropical forest evolution into a single walkable journey. Near the base, thick lowland forest gives way to farmland worked by local communities who have lived alongside the mountain for generations. Moving upward, the forest thickens into towering stands of hardwood trees, home to a dense tangle of vines, ferns, and flowering plants competing for every available beam of sunlight. Higher still, clouds begin to settle permanently among the branches, feeding a cooler, mossier world where the air itself feels different, heavier, and more alive. Few places on the planet allow a person to witness this kind of dramatic ecological shift within the boundaries of a single mountain range. It is within this layered wilderness that the Philippine eagle carves out its territory, and the size of that territory is staggering. A single breeding pair can require tens of thousands of hectares of forest to successfully hunt and raise a single chick, a fact that makes the eagle one of the most territory-hungry birds of prey on Earth. Unlike many species that can adapt to fragmented or partially cleared land, the Philippine eagle depends almost entirely on continuous, undisturbed canopy. It needs tall trees for nesting, open hunting corridors beneath the canopy, and an abundant population of prey animals like flying lemurs, civets, and other forest-dwelling creatures. Mount Hamiguitan, with its unbroken stretch of forest reaching from lowland to summit, offers exactly the kind of continuous habitat this eagle can no longer find in most of the Philippines. The eagle's nesting habits only add to how fragile its survival truly is. A breeding pair typically produces just a single egg every 2 years, and that egg takes months to hatch, followed by an extended period where the young eagle remains dependent on its parents to learn how to hunt and survive. This slow reproductive cycle means that even small losses in population can take decades to recover from, if recovery is possible at all. Add to this the threat of habitat loss, and it becomes clear why conservationists consider the Philippine eagle one of the most vulnerable birds of prey in the world. Every acre of forest lost is not just a loss of trees, but a direct blow to the eagle's already narrow chances of survival. Recognizing the significance of what Mount Hamiguitan protects, the Philippine government designated the mountain range as a wildlife sanctuary in the early 2000s, formally acknowledging its role as a critical habitat for endangered species. That recognition grew even further in 2014, when the United Nations formally listed Mount Hamiguitan as a World Heritage Site, placing it alongside some of the most ecologically significant locations on the planet. The designation was not simply about the eagle, though that alone would have justified the honor. It was about protecting an entire
interconnected system where hundreds of plant and animal species, many found absolutely nowhere else on Earth, could continue to exist exactly as they had for centuries, undisturbed by the pressures reshaping so much of the surrounding landscape. Among those unique species is a small carnivorous plant that thrives in the mountain's harsh upper soil, using specialized pitcher-shaped leaves to trap and digest insects in an environment too poor in nutrients to support normal plant growth.
Several varieties of this plant exist only on Mount Hamiguitan and nowhere else on the planet, a level of exclusivity that scientists rarely encounter even in the most biodiverse regions of the world. Alongside them grow rare orchids, ancient conifers, and moss-draped trees that together create a botanical landscape unlike almost anywhere else in Southeast Asia. This combination of extreme isolation, punishing soil, and centuries of undisturbed growth transformed Mount Hamiguitan into something far rarer than a simple forest.
It became an evolutionary time capsule, quietly preserving species that vanished from the rest of the region long ago.